Okay, it says 7, so I'm going to start. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our virtual event for females and type 1. Thank you all for joining. You're going to hear some really exciting things tonight about topics that are not spoken about enough, and clearly so because of the number of you who have joined us. So I hope you're going to find some really useful things to take away. And as well as that, this is a peer support event. You'll hear me talk about this all the time, but these things are great for getting to know other people who are living with type 1 and understanding some of the things that we all go through that we think are just weird and freakish to us, and they're really not. So yeah, please make use of that during the event tonight as well. I hope some of you had a chance to take part in the quick poll that we had going at the beginning of the event there. It's really interesting to see results just about who is here in the event in terms of your relationship to type 1, how you manage it, and more importantly, just we want to know if you see variances in your levels and if you've asked for help with these, because this is all really important information that just helps us all improve. So I would like to get started by introducing myself. Okay, so my name is Natalie Balmain. I am a woman living with type 1. Little bit of information about me on there, but basically I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes nearly 16 years ago in January 2007, 3 months before my 21st birthday, which was a bit of a birthday bummer. But since then, I've said that type 1 is simultaneously one of the worst and the best things that has ever happened to me, because it gave me access to an amazing community of people. And I feel like in some ways I've tried to give back to that community over the years, and that may be where you might have seen my face before. So I do some vlogging, as you'll see in one of the pictures. In 2017, I launched a clothing line called Type 1 Clothing, which was aimed at females specifically with type 1. And it was nice, like high-end fashion, dresses and jumpsuits that had zips that allowed you to do your injections without having to go to a bathroom and get half undressed, or pockets that held your pump but allowed your tubing to go through your clothes. And that kind of blew up a little bit. So I did a cover for The Guardian, which you'll see here with the diabetes headline, which I think was the first ever front cover where someone was openly wearing a glucose monitor on it. So that was pretty cool. And if you didn't see me on that, you might have seen me more recently on Channel 4's Make Me Prime Minister, where it was a bit like Apprentice, but for politics. And I won the first series and was crowned Britain's alternative Prime Minister. So that's a little bit about me, but more importantly, I would like to talk about the people behind this event. So I just want to move forward quickly and thank our sponsors for tonight: Liquide, Abbott, Dexcom, Medtrum, Omnipod. Thank you guys so much for contributing to this event. You're going to hear from everyone, and for sponsoring it and letting us do this and make this happen. So a bit of housekeeping before we start, just to improve your experience tonight. Our event is hosted via Zoom. To help prevent technical difficulties, we do ask that you try and reduce your other internet usage to help you stay connected. I know that's not easy if the kids are streaming Netflix or playing Xbox online, but yeah, anything you can do, that helps. To protect your identity, your camera and microphone are automatically turned off, so we can't see or hear you. But please do use the chat feature at the bottom. If you hover over the bottom or the top on some people's, I think, you'll see a little bar come up and you'll see a chat feature which you can use to talk to each other, get to know each other. And there's also a Q&A feature at the bottom as well, which you can use to ask questions of the presenters and the companies that are doing presentations tonight. So please make use of that as well. Right, I'll share the agenda. I won't waste any more time. We've got some really exciting things going on tonight. So first of all, we're going to hear from the lovely Mary Murphy from JDRF about their latest research. We've got a presentation from Asya at Abbott. And then we're going to hear from the lovely Dr. Fiona Campbell, OBE, I believe, all about female hormones and specifically at younger ages. So we've got a really broad range of things we're going to talk about. Air Liquide are going to then give us a presentation. We're also going to hear from Dr. Helen Murphy about pregnancy hormones. So that's going to be really interesting. We're going to hear from my lovely friends at Dexcom. Then at just before 8 o'clock, there will be a 10-minute comfort break. So you can pop to the loo, check your blood sugars, do whatever it is that you need to do. I've got all my hypo snacks next to me, so I'm ready to go. I am locked in for the night. And when we come back from the comfort break, we're going to have a presentation from Omnipod, and then at 8:10, a really, really great section, which is the lived experience section. We're going to be talking all about pregnancy, perimenopause, and menopause, things that don't get talked about enough as it is, let alone in conjunction with type 1 diabetes. So that's going to be really interesting. And then we'll be wrapping up at 9 o'clock, and I will say a quick thank you, and we will have some other Slido polls for you to do dotted throughout this evening. So do look out for those. I will let you know. So I'm going to hand over to the lovely Mary, who is she's working behind the scenes tonight. So feel free to say hi to Mary at any point. She's been the driving force behind this. And Mary's just going to show you a quick presentation about JDRF, what they do and what they're up to at the moment. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Natalie. Right, bear with me as I move. So I have pre-recorded a piece because I'm not good at doing two things at the same time. Okay, so I'm going to take you through what JDRF does. JDRF is the leading global organization funding research into type 1 diabetes. It was initially founded in May 1970 in the US by parents of children who had what was called juvenile diabetes back then, but we all know it affects anyone at any age. JDRF UK has been established since 1986 and is here in the UK supporting the type 1 community and driving and supporting the increasingly strong research into this condition locally. Our strength lies in our exclusive focus and singular influence on the worldwide effort to end type 1. Fundraising efforts are combined across the globe in order to accelerate research to make life easier today and one day for a world without type 1. We work with the UK government's two major funding bodies, the Medical Research Council and National Institute of Health Research, to make type 1 diabetes research a priority. And we work with government departments to help them understand the impact of type 1 diabetes on the UK and the excellence in research that the UK can provide to the global mission to cure type 1. Our mission is to improve lives today and tomorrow by accelerating life-changing breakthroughs to cure, prevent, and treat type 1 and its complications. Over the next few years, we are looking at driving UK research to develop cures and improve lives of people with type 1, along with accelerating access to type 1 technologies and medicines and delivering information and support to people living with type 1. The more excellent type 1 diabetes research we get funded, the quicker we can drive developments to cure, treat, and prevent type 1 diabetes. We also advocate for the development of a connected research community focused on autoimmune conditions across the UK to generate advances in knowledge and treatments for people living with autoimmune conditions, particularly type 1 diabetes. Since we were founded in the 1970s, we funded over £2 billion worth of research into type 1. In fact, we fund the best research wherever it takes place in the whole world. As you are probably aware, type 1 is a complex condition and there isn't an easy answer to treating or curing it. That's why right now we're supporting around 400 research projects and more than 50 clinical trials. In the UK alone, we are currently funding or co-funding more than 30 research projects. In fact, due to the high quality of UK research, JDRF research globally spends more on research here in the UK than we raise. And with this research, we're improving the lives of people with type 1 until we find a cure. Now, I say until we find a cure because JDRF has played a role in nearly every major advance in type 1 diabetes research since its founding in the 1970s. So it really is just a matter of time and money. Here, I've picked out a few of the biggest advances over the last 50 years that came from JDRF research. JDRF researchers developed an experimental insulin pump, which, as you can see, was not exactly portable. This was a step forward from the backpack, but it sets us on a path to the insulin pumps we see today, which can deliver tiny amounts of insulin on demand, as well as throughout the day, giving much more flexibility to those who can access them. In 2008, a JDRF-funded clinical trial was the first to show that continuous glucose monitoring technology helps prevent dangerous blood glucose highs and lows. This was a big step towards type 1 technology gaining acceptance. In 2014, JDRF researchers developed a way to rapidly convert stem cells into insulin-producing cells in the lab, a vital step towards replacing the lost cells in people with type 1. In 2019, researchers found that an immunotherapy called teplizumab can delay the development of type 1 by an average of 3 years. The drug was recently awarded an innovation passport in the UK for its potential to slow or prevent type 1 and also with the FDA. The very next year, we announced the launch of the world's first licensed artificial pancreas app or hybrid closed loop app. It's built off the back of 13 years of JDRF funded research here in the UK. And finally, in the last few months, we've learned that the first person has taken part in a clinical trial of a beta cell replacement treatment that's based on the 2014 stem cell breakthrough made possible by JDRF research. But what has this got to do with females and type 1? Well, for us today, it's technology, CGM to help us to see the variances that female hormones are influencing. Other diabetes technologies like smart pens and connected pens and hybrid closed loop to help us manage those dynamic insulin needs. We know that diabetes technologies help improve health outcomes for all with type 1. Research has historically been carried out on the male body for safety reasons because women of childbearing ages were considered high risk for research trials and assumptions that there would be similarities, but it's not the case. And this is changing. Global diabetes conferences now feature sessions specifically focused on females and diabetes. Research is beginning to see these variations because of wider access to CGM and that data. But you can influence and help accelerate your own course and for others coming behind you. It's by asking for diabetes technologies that help, asking for flash and CGM to see the variances in our own BGs, ask for smart connected pens so you can show the change in your insulin needs digitally. Informing our consultants about these variations, asking for help, asking for smart connected pens, insulin pumps and hybrid closed loops to help show these variances in our insulin needs and to manage those better. It's finding peer support to strengthen your confidence and amplify your voice and taking part in research wherever you can. We at JDRF UK are here to support access to technology across the 4 nations and help amplify the needs of females with type 1. Alongside fundraising for a life without type 1, we meet our other 2 mission goals, accelerating access to type 1 technologies and by providing information and support to the type 1 community through these simple steps. Much of this work is done through our community engagement team. This support is provided through our website, our downloadable and requestable content, our community inbox, and through our events, both virtual, like this one, and in person. So I'm going to take you through these very briefly. We help you have a better clinic by providing support on what that looks like. And you can see this here on these links in our website. We help demystify the technologies. This is a page on our website about smart insulin pens. We have tech explainer animations on our YouTube and on our website that explain how these tech work in a very simplified way. We point to further information and more in-depth information like the DTN. We also bring people together through our community events. We offer a portfolio of events to provide trusted non-clinical information on all aspects of living well with type 1 in a comfortable, accessible setting to bridge the gap between the care and support clinical teams can offer and effective self-management of the condition. These are through speaker-based events, virtual speaker events, standalone technology exhibitions, those that are combined, and sports days. We're creating different types of content too to support females with type 1 specifically. Our pregnancy toolkit is available to download on the website, but we've also started to bring people's stories out. And this is where you come in. You can have your story shared. We're here for you in all forms of content and support. Follow any of these links provided in the presentation tonight. We have website content, kits for children and adults, with discovery events, we have information and resources to download and request. Get in touch with us by emailing us at outreach@jdrf.org.uk so we can help you shape what your needs are to your clinic, and we can also help share your experiences of being female and having type 1 diabetes. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mary, for that presentation. So for those of you who didn't already know what JDRF do, obviously they do some incredible work, and it's why I and many of you do so much fundraising for them. So thank you. And yes, thank you for Mary for pointing out about people getting in touch, especially about their experiences. We know that women are disproportionately affected when it comes to healthcare. And I want to say just quickly here at the moment that people of colour especially as well, so women of colour disproportionately affected, please do reach out to JDRF on that outreach email to let us know if you've had any negative experiences, what whether you've been offered stuff or anything, because it really does help make access better for everybody. So thank you. Next up, I would like to introduce the lovely Asia from Abbott, who is going to give us a quick presentation about Abbott and what they do and their service for people living with type 1.
Thank you for that. So guys, my name is Asia. I work for Abbott and do the Freestyle Libre sensors. And today I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview and also talk to you about the guidance change, which will mean that it's more available to you guys all over. So I'm going to just share my screen now. But the first thing I want to cover is the new NICE guidelines. So earlier on this year, NICE actually, put out that any patient that is type 1 should be offered flash glucose monitoring, which for you guys, if anybody's already on it, will be the Freestyle Libre 2, and also have the offering of Freestyle Libre 3, which is the real-time continuous glucose monitoring. Now, some of you might be thinking, what are these and what's the difference? So anything to do with, flash or with Libre 3 or 2 is just for you to not have to finger prick. So it's just swapping finger pricking for being able to scan your sensor. So each sensor, regardless of which one you wear, lasts for 2 weeks. And then all you do is peel it off and put a new one on. Now, over them 2 weeks, instead of you having to finger prick, you can literally just scan your sensor to get your reading. Now, the reason I wanted to cover the guidelines is because, especially with the topics that we're covering today, I want you to be aware of what the guidance is. And a lot of places in the UK are actually now taking this guidance on. So only recently, the Liverpool and the whole old Pan Mersey area has also taken this on now. So it's quite good for you to know which way things are moving. Now, I'm going to go through Libre 3 because I think a lot of the people on the phones or on the meeting today will want to know about Libre 3 with it being real time. However, I want you to be aware that Libre 2 is something that your GP can prescribe to you. So it just makes it a lot easier for your access if that is something that you want to do. So I'm going to run through Libre 3. But before I do that, I just want to kind of put it out there that this is what you will get to see. So at the moment, where you might be finger pricking the 4 times in the day, you would only get to see the reading at the black dots. So you don't understand if you've come out of a hypo state or if you're going into one. Whereas with Freestyle Libre, if it's the continuous or if it's the flash glucose monitoring, you'll get the full picture of what's going on. And this then can also be shared with your GP, your practice, your DSNs, so that they also can kind of keep an eye and kind of support you with that as well. Now, I've kind of put two together just to show you the difference. So on the left-hand side, it shouldn't say Libre 3. You can see I've done a bit of a mock together there. So the left-hand side picture is Libre 2. So the sensor is slightly bigger. We'd say it's the size of a £2 coin. And then on the right-hand side, you've got Libre 3, which is like the size of a 20p piece. Now, they both do the same thing. However, with a Libre 2, which is this one here, you have to physically scan your sensor. However, with a Libre 3, it continuously takes a reading every minute. Now, looking at Libre 3, with it being the continuous glucose monitoring system, it's just good for you to know that regardless of which one you're on, you do not need to finger prick for anything unless you're a driver and you scan your sensor and you show 4 or below. So it's quite good for you to know that you could literally put a sensor on and not have to finger prick, because it has been approved that you can use the sensor reading to make any, any decisions that you need to make in the day. Now, the biggest thing with Libre 2 and 3, but 3 definitely, is the fact that you get a reading every single minute automatically. Because it takes a reading every minute, you're only ever 60 seconds away from knowing if you're going to feel unwell or if you're going into that hypo state. It is 5 times faster than any of the other CGMs out on the market, and it's always on. So all you do is open the app and your reading is there. You don't need to do anything else. So that's the fantastic thing that Libre 3 can give. Now, if you go for Libre 2, exactly the same kind of situation. The only difference is that you would take your phone out and scan your sensor. And to be honest, whichever one you end up on, we have found that there is some really positive benefits for type 1 patients and type 2 to help you become more in range, which will then in turn help with your HbA1c as well. Now, just to kind of show you how it works, you get an applicator that has the sensor inside. You literally put it against your arm and in one push, you attach it to your skin. You can wear it anywhere at the top of your arms. And what's quite good is not only do you get your Libre 3 app, but you've got friends and family, that can also get your readings. So as you scan, they can also see that, or as you just kind of stream, they will also get that too. And then the last picture on the end is where your healthcare professional gets to see what's going on as well. Now, the biggest thing that we can offer with any of the CGM stuff are the arrows. So what the arrow does is it tells you which way your glucose is moving. So if you're at 6.2 and your arrow is pointing up, it means that you're going to be moving up quickly, as much as 3 millimoles in 30 minutes. So you'll end up at 9.2. Now, if you're at 6.2 and your arrow is pointing down, you'll end up at 3.2 in half an hour, which means that you would hypo. So it's giving you that extra information so that you can make the decisions you need to make, whether to eat, whether not to, if to have a piece of toast before you go out, whatever it is to kind of help support you with that. It's really easy to put on, but I've covered that anyway. We train all of our patients, and also you can get online training, so you have a choice of how you want to be trained. This is what your app would look like we've covered anyway, and you also have the ability to add any of your insulin in the Add Note button at the bottom there. Now, with Libre 2, we actually have recently connected with Novo Nordisk, so their smart pen connects. I think my time is up. If you've got any questions, give me a shout, guys. It was lovely speaking to you.
Thank you, Asia.
Natalie,
we'll let you off because that was actually really interesting. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I'm not going to waste any time here. I'm just going to get straight into our next speaker, because it is the wonderful Dr. Fiona Campbell, OBE. Fiona is a consultant in pediatric diabetes and leads the award-winning Children and Young People's Diabetes Service at Leeds Children's Hospital. She was awarded an OBE this year for her work in helping to improve diabetes care nationally and locally for children and young people affected by diabetes. And amongst many, many, many other accolades, she's also the chair of the National Children and Young People's Diabetes Network in England and Wales. So I'm not going to waste any more time. This is the lady you want to hear from. Fiona, thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
That's no problem at all, Natalie, and thank you very much for your kind introduction. I did get an honour from the Queen. I was on her last list, I think, before we lost the lovely lady. I've yet to receive it though. So the excitement is, who do I get it from when I go down to the palace? But it was from my work over many years, actually, about 30 years, looking after children and young people with diabetes in the community. And I was absolutely delighted because it's been my pleasure and my honour to serve the community over so many years. And part of doing that is accepting invitations to come and speak to the community as I'm doing tonight. So thank you for everyone's support from me. So I've been asked by the team at JDRF this evening to speak to all you lovely ladies. I don't think I have ever actually spoken at a ladies only event. So this is a first for me, actually. I think I see about over 130 of you on the call. And as you know, I'm a pediatrician, so my training, my background clinically is with very young people, babies all the way through to young adults, really. But clearly, I have conversations with many, and I am quite well versed, I think, on how hormones affect glucose management and potentially what we can maybe do to help. So I want to do it in chronological order because I'm aware, looking at the attendees, that there is a variation in the age, and I'll just start at the very beginning really and work up through, and I'm going to leave my very good colleague Helen to cover the pregnancy aspects because that's certainly not my area of expertise. And probably unusually, I am not going to use any slides this evening because I didn't really want to turn this into a lecture, more about awareness raising and you asking points of clarification. And I didn't want to make it complicated because actually hormones are complicated. Life with diabetes is complicated. And there are many, many things that affect glucose control that people may put down to hormones, but they probably aren't anything to do with them. So let's just start. I think the community at large is under quite a lot of pressure right now. And the reason I think this is that we have really, really ramped up the pressure on monitoring glucose. And we just obviously heard Masha about the more you know about your glucose level, the better your response to intervening to control it, and the more time you will have in the range of blood glucose that we know protects to a very large extent from developing the complications of living with type 1 diabetes. So before, in the old days, as you saw on the graph previously, if you did 4 tests a day, you saw 4 points in time during a 24-hour period. And we've just heard now there are pieces of tech that you can wear, and indeed people like myself encourage you to wear, that measure your glucose levels every minute. And that can be extremely helpful. But it can also be quite frustrating. And the reason I turn to the use of the word frustrating is that you will see fluctuations in your glucose levels that you just don't feel empowered to do very much about. And we hear this story a lot. I do the same amount of exercise. I have given the same amount of insulin, have the same amount of carbs. And one day things go really well. And my glucose levels look very nice and flat within the target range of between glucose of 4 and 10 millimoles. And I allegedly do the same thing the following day, same time, same quantity of insulin, same carbohydrate load and exercise environment, and things are completely different. And there is a real frustration that starts when people are very young, and when I mean that, I mean looking at numbers, and they can say, well, Mama, I did the same yesterday. Why isn't it the same today? And we see that all the way through. And this is because glucose, and what we call with a posh name called homeostasis, or glucose levels control in the body, are influenced by very many things. Now, hormones is the subject of tonight's conversation, but we all know that in addition to hormones, we have stress is one of them that can affect our glucose control. We have lack of sleep. We can have emotions just in general, whether you're happy or sad or excited, all that can affect glucose. Whether you've just done exercise or are recovering from exercise can affect your glucose. And obviously diet in terms of its content, its quantity, and your response to giving insulin, the quantity of insulin and the timing in relation to the carbohydrate, protein, and fat intake. So these are things that are happening all of the time, and they're happening without your control in some part. And the hormones are definitely a part that you really have no control over. They happen because ladies have a cyclical release of both hormones, estrogen, which we all know about, and progesterone, which is another hormone that we all know about. Now, when estrogen levels begin to rise in the peripubertal, so this is the age of a young girl who will be approaching puberty, so may not have many or any signs of puberty in the form of breast bud development or pubic hair or hair under the arms. There may be no physically visible signs, but the hormone levels behind the scenes are beginning to change in keeping with a child moving through the adolescent phase, and the hormone levels alter during the course of the day and the night. Estrogen is one of these hormones that fluctuates, increases in amount, and starts maturing the young female body. And that developed from the ovaries, and when the levels go up, then we can see that this affects hormone balance. And what happens is that if you have large levels of estrogen, then it affects how insulin and glucose work at a cellular level. That's where the glucose runs over the cells, the functioning parts of the body. And when estrogen goes up and progesterone levels alter, then we find that the body becomes less or more sensitive to insulin. And what we find when we're measuring estrogen or we're measuring progesterone is that if our estrogen levels go up in our body, we become actually less resistant. So if the estrogen levels drop in our body, we become more resistant to the effects of insulin. Okay, so estrogen goes down, and then resistance to insulin goes up, and then glucose levels go up as a result of that. And that happens in a cyclical sort of way during the course of our monthly cycles. And a lot of times the young girls who come in to the clinic will say, do you know, I can predict when I am going to have my period because I become really resistant to the effects of insulin. And I really, really have to maybe double the amount of insulin on my basal insulin if I'm on a pump, or my background insulin if I'm on injectable long-acting insulin. And that may happen for 2 or 3 days prior to the period becoming obvious and the bleeding happening. And then during the course of the bleeding side, then the estrogen levels begin to level off again, the resistance becomes less, and then the glucose levels become easier to manage with much more normal for the person levels of insulin. So, and we can look at that in a sort of monthly way, and there is a constant fluctuation with an increase in our estrogen level, and that prepares the endometrium, the womb, if you like, and then there is a drop off of the estrogen, and in association with that towards the period time, the resistance becomes a problem, and then the glucose levels go up. And this is very, very critical and entirely normal. So it really isn't anything to worry about. And what is very important is people need the amount of insulin that they need. And I get an impression when I have my young girls in the clinic that they worry that their body, something odd is happening, that all of a sudden they require more insulin. But they're very relieved, if you like, when we describe what's happening with the hormones in the body, why it's happening, part of the ovulation, the cycle that happens in all ladies that are healthy, type 1, any condition. If you're healthy, the body will ovulate on a monthly or 5-weekly or maybe even a 3-weekly cycle. Everyone has their own sort of length of cycle. And during that cycle, there's this increase and then falling away, particularly of the hormone estrogen. And that describes why we see this variation in glucose. And obviously, with continuous monitoring, ladies are going to be able to see the effects of their hormones much more easily than ever before. Now, what then that gives us a great opportunity, though. And we've heard, haven't we, about we've heard from our friends at Abbott about Libre 3 and how Libre 2 and how continuous monitoring helps stabilize the glucose level. Now, if we revert to insulin to help us during those phases, and we can almost predict when they're happening, and we can accept that it's normal, then we can start using the technology to assist us to stabilize the glucose during this tricky period in the lady's lifetime, in that month. And we can use background insulin in the form of injectable insulin to be increased perhaps for a day or two before or during, or for as long as it takes to bring the levels of insulin up to try and overcome the resistance to the insulin that the estrogen is causing. And then when the time is right, the background can be dropped back. Equally, if we're pump users, then the background can be altered by basal insulin adjustment. And this can compensate for this high glucose level. And again, at the right time, can be dropped back after 2 or 3 days. And indeed, we encourage our young ladies, our young girls, to set perhaps a preset basal pattern that they can flick onto when they know that their period is due and they're beginning to see higher levels of glucose that they associate with menstrual cycle. And this can be extremely helpful. And often they also need a slight uplift in the amount of insulin that is needed with their carbohydrates in their diet at the same time. And just generally accept that the body requires this amount of help to overcome the natural hormonal rises and falls. So the other bit I wanted to cover really is the compound effect of this in people who are growing. And in ladies, they go into a peripubertal phase around about the age of 8 to 9, into 10 with some of them. They then go into a pubertal phase with physical body changes in association with their hormonal changes. And most ladies are fully formed, if you like, by around about the age of 14. Some people are a little bit older, sometimes encroaching 15, 16, but it's quite unusual. And people grow both in weight and in stature for about until they hit their 15th birthday. And once they have their period, then their growth stops. And then we signify a much easier way forward as far as hormones are concerned. So this is my little piece. Natalie, does that cover what you wanted me to cover? I think
it was brilliant, Fiona. Thank you. I actually didn't want to step in because
no, you're the timekeeper.
No,
I'm under instruction.
It was absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for that. And I just want to remind everybody to please put your questions to Fiona into the Q&A while she's here and available to answer some of them. And yeah, then they're available for everyone to read as well. But that was brilliant because it's true, isn't it? Your hormonal balance is like a finely tuned ecosystem, really, isn't it? And it's you know, when one hormone is out of whack or up or down, it affects everything else. And I know I get that few days before my period where my blood starts to go really high, and then the day of crash hypo, and that's it. So, you know, before I had my, you know, I wear a Dexcom. Before I had my Dexcom, that was so hard to understand. So yeah, that, you know, if you're not using tech already, I highly recommend everyone to listen to all the presentations from the various companies tonight, because it's definitely something worth checking out. So thank you again, Fiona. And I'm just going to introduce the lovely Alexa from Liquide. So Alexa, you know what's happening now. I'm going to be keeping you to time, so no pressure.
Yeah, no problem.
But obviously, you know, we want to hear all about your fantastic products. So
no
I'll
problem.
hand over to you.
Thank you. I've timed myself, so hopefully I should be okay. So yeah, I'm Alexa. Hopefully that doesn't set all your robots off in your house. I'm from Air Liquide. So we distribute the Tandem T-Slim X2 insulin pump on behalf of Tandem Diabetes. So we're the UK distributor for that device. So the Tandem T-Slim X2 is a small, compact, modern design pump. It has a colour touchscreen and a rechargeable battery. And when it's used in conjunction with Dexcom G6, which is a CGM monitor, you have the advanced hybrid closed loop system called Control IQ. And we also have a system called Basal IQ, which is a low glucose suspend feature. I'm going to talk to you more about the Control IQ system today, because that's a more advanced system. So Control IQ, it's an advanced hybrid closed loop system. So what that means is the pump and the Dexcom would communicate with each other every 5 minutes, and it predicts 30 minutes in advance of what the blood sugars are predicted to be in 30 minutes time. And based on that prediction, it aims to keep your time in range between 3.9 and 10 millimoles as much as possible by adjusting insulin delivery. So if someone's going a little bit high, it'll give more insulin. If it's going a bit lower, it'll give less. It also suspends if someone's predicted to be less than 3.9 millimoles, and it'll give automatic correction boluses at certain times if they're predicted to be above 10 millimoles. So this table shows how the system works. The numbers are treatment values, so the pump and the Dexcom are working together to predict what's happening in 30 minutes time, and based on what your predicted blood sugar reading is, the insulin delivery is adjusted. It works in separate ways. So the first column shows how it works during the day, and then we have sleep activity and exercise activity. So just really quickly, the sleep activity aims to keep tighter control overnight, because we don't have food and exercise going on. And then exercise activity aims to run us a little bit higher to prevent hypos during exercise. So that's something you can turn on and off in the pump. I think that's pretty much my 2 minutes. So I will stop there. But if anyone has any questions they want to ask in the chat, then please feel free to join me there. Thank you.
That was incredibly impressive.
I've got a little
Alexa.
timer going,
Like,
so I
thank
thought
you
I'd
so
try.
much. Wow, that was
welcome.
a lot of a very quick time to deliver a lot of
If I was a bit
information.
fast. Thank you.
But on a very interesting subject. So if you do have questions for Alexa, please put them in the Q&A. I am super excited about closed loop. This is amazing. If you don't know more about it, like I said, please ask all of your questions to Alexa, because it is, you know, for people like me, or I'm sure many of you who race around, and, you know, my life is not a routine by any stretch of the imagination. Closed loop is going to offer some serious answers to all of that. So next up, I would like to introduce the lovely Dr. Helen Murphy. Dr. Helen Murphy is a professor of medicine, specifically diabetes and antenatal care at the University of East Anglia, and is also a practicing clinician at Norfolk and Norwich University Hospital Trust and Cambridge University Hospital Trust. I don't know how you find time for all of that, but you're also the clinical lead for National Pregnancy in Diabetes. And I'm really excited to hear this conversation with you tonight, because as a woman of a certain age, 36, every time I speak to my consultant, he's like, I've got to ask Natalie, any plans? And I'm like, got to have a boyfriend first, but thanks for asking. So Helen, please tell us more.
Oh, we live in modern times, Natalie. There are lots of ways to have babies nowadays.
Fine.
Now let me start and hope that the sharing of the screen will allow my slides. But unlike Fiona, I will never remember what all the things I want to talk about if I don't have my slides to remind me. So I am going to talk mainly about technology. I'm going to talk about the outcomes of pregnancy for women living with type 1. You'll hear me use a little bit of jargon. I apologize in advance, but CGM just rolls off my tongue in a way that continuous glucose monitoring doesn't. You'll hear me talk a little bit about pumps and closed loop systems. I will talk a little bit, because I am a scientist, I automatically fall into talking about the biomedical evidence, but I will also talk about some of the work we're doing about the pregnancy experiences of women living with type 1 through their pregnancies, and with a bit of a nod to the future as well. I'm going to start with the scary stuff, and I'm doing that just to get it out of the way, because as soon as I see a woman with type 1 diabetes in pregnancy, she's convinced, no matter what I say, that something bad is going to happen in the pregnancy. And I spend, I think, 90% of my professional life reassuring women with diabetes that the vast majority of women with type 1, with all sorts of diabetes, actually have healthy, normal babies. You know, there are some potentially serious complications of having diabetes, but actually for the vast majority of women, they will have healthy, normal babies. This little fellow I'm showing you in the picture is something we really don't see nearly so much of these days. He has got a severe birth defect, whereby you can see that his legs and his lower spine have not formed normally. And we used to see a lot of that. That predominantly happens in women who enter pregnancy really at the higher levels of HbA1c. So 8, 9, 10% in the old money, or 64 to 86 millimoles per litre. And we just don't see that so much nowadays at all. But for those women, often they're the younger age women. So maybe some of the girls who are in Fiona's clinic, or women who with more difficult social circumstances, with the higher HbA1cs, often with men with a lot of diabetes, distress, denial, sometimes poor mental health. It's the ones with the A1C above 86 that are most at risk of having the severe birth defects. And, you know, the really important thing actually for everybody listening is that for women with type 1, if you're able to be organized enough, which I know is a big ask, but for those women who do plan their pregnancies, and medically by planning, we mean that you get yourself on the 5 milligram, the high dose folic acid, and you get your HbA1c. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect. You can see from the graph here, women with type 1 diabetes are the lines in blue. And for women you know, the risk of the serious complications of pregnancy really, really kicks in at the higher HbA1c levels at 53, at 64. And it's at those very high levels that the risk of a birth defect gets up to 10%. But for women who plan their pregnancies, so they get on 5 mg folic acid, they use the technology, they're being careful about dietary intake, they get their HbA1c to the best it can be. And I prefer that way of looking at it. It's a little bit like Tesco ads. It's every little helps. It doesn't have to be perfect to prevent the severe birth defects. Just get it to the best you can, get 5 milligrams of folic acid, and actually the risk of a serious complication is really almost the same as women in the background maternity population. So you get those risks of serious problems down to 3%, 4%, meaning that 95, 96% of women will have healthy live babies. And in addition, we heard a little bit about the JDRF pregnancy tool. The Tommies have one. There's a lot of resources out there. And like everything else, there's an app for everything nowadays, but there's also an app for planning pregnancy that might, you know, helps give some tips and keeps women motivated to get there. But for me, the important message is that every little bit helps. I think if women waited to have perfect blood sugars to have babies, there wouldn't be nearly so many of them. So do they get it to the best it can be and get folic acid. And that really is just the same. That's exactly showing you the same data, just a little bit bigger. So you can really want to get that message across. It's HbA1c at the higher levels. And probably most people's hospitals will offer something called a pre-pregnancy or a pre-conception clinic. And one of the real worries is that, of course, the people who flood into my pre-pregnancy clinic are the ones who are already doing perfect and they want to get it even better. And really what we need to be doing is reaching out much more to women who are struggling with the higher levels of HbA1c. And they're the ones who will benefit most from pre-pregnancy care and probably from the technology. And the way that CGM is funded in pregnancy at the moment is it's increasingly accessible, I think, for any pregnant woman with type 1 diabetes. But actually, to have a healthy and safe pregnancy, we really want women using these technologies before pregnancy, so they're entering into pregnancy in the best possible shape. I saw a question pop up on the chat about the complications during pregnancy, and someone saying their daughter had a baby about 6 weeks early. And, you know, pregnancy complications are common with type 1, but these are not, you know, these are by no means deal breakers. So the average pregnancy with type 1 diabetes lasts for about 37 weeks. So women are not going on to 40 weeks like in the background maternity population. But having a fit, well, healthy baby at 37 weeks, the vast majority of those mums and babies will be home from hospital in 3 or 4 days without problems. Now, probably about 1 in 2 babies are born with what we call large gestational age or macrosomic. One of the mums I saw on the ward last week described her baby as a chubster. So they're a little bit plumper and fatter. But, you know, a healthy live baby with a little bit of extra padding that is really not a major problem. It's something that is our bread and butter. We can deal with it day in, day out. It does have some implications for women in how they deliver their babies. And of course, if a baby grows to beyond a certain size, then actually it might be more advisable or recommended to have that delivery by cesarean section. But the reality is most of these babies are born around 37 weeks. So they're not actually ever going to be there long enough to develop very, very serious problems with overweight. And, you know, what we can do during pregnancy is aiming for the tightest glucose levels. And before we had CGM, of course, glucose levels were measured by HbA1c, the blood test. And the really important thing to remember is when a woman is pregnant, she's growing, her red blood cells are turning over really rapidly. And her main job is growing bone marrow for the baby. So HbA1c levels just fall. They're kind of falsely lower. It's a little bit like fake news, a HbA1c in pregnancy. So a level that is 48 at the beginning of pregnancy is the same pretty much as 43 during the second and the third trimesters. So it's important just to be aware that A1c is a little bit different in pregnancy and the goalposts are tighter. Of course, the glucose targets are also tighter during pregnancy. And this slide shows really much the same as the last slide, that the lower you can get it, the better, and that women who are able to get the HbA1c in the second and third trimesters to as near to 6.1% as possible, they have the lowest risk of having these complications of larger babies, babies that are born a little bit earlier, or babies that are admitted to neonatal care units. This is the study that was funded by JDRF, and actually it happened in a really funny way when we, after the main JDRF trial of continuous glucose monitors, I said to JDRF, well, that's great, but what are you doing for women? And why aren't we having a study for pregnant women? Why are they being excluded? And actually JDRF did put their money where their mouth was, and they found the funds to organize a trial exclusively in pregnant women and women who are planning for pregnancy. And we hugely applaud them for that, because most device manufacturers and insulin manufacturers run a mile away from pregnancy, and too hard, too risky, will take too long. And so it was really exciting actually to be able to work with colleagues from right across the entire JDRF international family. So I led this trial together with my good friend Denise Faig, who's based in Canada, and we ran it across, I think, 15 centres in the UK, 10 or 15 centres in Canada, some centres in Ireland, the US, Italy and Spain. So truly an international, multinational study. And next slide, please, Mary. And actually, it's about 5 years ago. And of course, at that time, it was just as CGMs were becoming into use, but they were not widely used. So what we learned from the trial was that women, if we gave women access to technology during pregnancy, they had lower HbA1c levels at 24 weeks and at 34 weeks. So that's the CGM women there in red. And actually, really importantly, even though there was 31 centres in the trial, the effect of the CGM, even if it was small, it was the same across all centres. It didn't matter whether women were using insulin pumps or whether they were using multiple daily injections. They all benefited by almost exactly the same amount. And to me, that tells me using this technology is not about something that we clinicians are doing in our clinics. It's something that women are doing. It's giving them more information about what's happening in their bodies, and that allows them to make different choices or better decisions around their diabetes treatment day to day. The next slide shows kind of the same thing, but now it's in terms of instead of it being HbA1c, it's the time that is spent in the target glucose range. And we call this now time in range, or TIR. And I have to remind pregnant women all the time that although it goes from 0 to 100%, this is not like an exam. Nobody is getting 100% here. And if you don't have a functioning pancreas, most women are entering into pregnancy with a time in range of around about, you can see here, 40–50%. And really what we want to do is get from 50% in the beginning of pregnancy to 60 and 70% as soon as possible. And we know that if we can get women to that 70% time in range, so that's nearly 17 hours a day, that is good enough to really, really impact on the complications of diabetes pregnancy. But it is hard work. There's no denying it. This is just saying one of the questions we were asked in this study is it any easier if you have a pump compared to injections? And rather surprisingly, you'd think it would be that much easier to bolus on the pump, and you've got all your different basal rates. But the amount of time that women spent in the target range, the 50% was the same in the beginning, and they all got to 64–65%. So the actual, there's more to type 1 than just technology, and having the tools, even though the pump does allow for more flexibility, that didn't necessarily mean that the glucose levels were in the target range more often or for more of the day. What was actually important, if you can remember back that slide where I showed the HbA1c, it was these teeny tiny changes. There was 0.17%, a tiny amount of HbA1c made a massive difference to the rates of complications in the babies. So having an extra 5% time in range or a 0.2% difference in HbA1c halved the rates of these large babies. It halved the rates of babies that were born with low glucose levels after birth. And it also halved the rates of babies that went to the neonatal intensive care unit. Now, there's a lot of numbers I know on that, but actually the thing that made the policymakers really stand up was the fact that these intensive care unit admissions cost about £2,000 a day. And to give a pregnant woman access to CGM technology, you can do that across the whole pregnancy for £2,000. So we did not have to stop very many neonatal care admissions for CGM to actually pay for itself and save the health, save the NHS money, which goodness knows it needs. And of course, anyone who's used it, we've heard these sorts of comments, and this was one of our participants. You can see these were the much more old-fashioned, right back in the time when sensors were worn on the tummy, whereas now they're predominantly worn on the backs of arms. But really, I mean, yeah, I just can't imagine. This trial is 5 years old now, and it's inconceivable that anyone would try managing their pregnancies, their type 1 pregnancies, with just finger sticks alone. I take my hat off to women who used to be able to do that without having access to what's going on with their blood sugars. So it was this data, it was really this study funded by JDRF and, all of those people who've jumped off hospital roofs and organized events and picnics to raise money for research that contributed to the clinical guidelines, then what we call the NICE clinical guidelines, saying that real-time continuous glucose monitoring should be offered to all pregnant women with type 1 diabetes. And we're just beginning. So that was rolled out through 2021. And early next year, we'll have all of the real world information from about 3,000 to 4,000 pregnant women with type 1 who will have used CGM in the real world setting, not just the clinical trial setting. And what we hope to see is whether the impressive results from the clinical study are able to be replicated in real life. And we heard a little bit earlier about the DTN videos, and one of the questions we had at the end of the study was, well, it's all very great in these research centres having access to CGM, but what's going to happen across the 150 maternity clinics in the UK? So we worked with colleagues to develop a series of videos supporting pregnant women, teaching them a little bit about this much tighter glucose range for pregnancy, what the targets are, aiming for 70% of the time in the target in the pregnancy range, no more than 6 hours a day above it, and no more than 1 hour a day in the hypoglycemic range. And actually, one of the things we know from this is data that's taken from Sweden, and I think there might be a few arrows on it. So Mary, if I can get you to click through it, it's showing you sort of what I've showed you from concept, that women start out in pregnancy at 40 to 50% time and range. And then you see by the end of the first trimester, at 12 weeks, they've got up to 50%. And for very many women, it's not until the third trimester, it's between 28 and 36 weeks, that they get to that close to that 70% time in the target range. And I think what we've learned from having access to that data as clinicians is that women work really hard in the first trimester, and then things seem to flatten off. We don't make a lot of progress through the second trimester. And that comes back to what Fiona was saying earlier. That is the impact of these pregnancy hormones. It's all of this estrogen, all of the growth hormone that comes from the placenta and comes from the baby that makes it really difficult to get on top of the glucose levels. So women end up doubling, tripling, sometimes even quadrupling their insulin doses, predominantly their pre-meal doses, trying to get to that 70% time and range. And what we need to try to do is, of course, to support women to get there sooner, not at 28 to 38 weeks when the pregnancy is almost finished. But what we want to do is develop and evaluate new technologies that help support women get to that 70% from as early as 10, 12 weeks to have the best possible pregnancy outcomes. And this again is this is another one of my Tesco's, but of course other supermarkets do exist, that every little bit matters. So even if it seems tiny, even a 1% time and range improvement will lower the baby's risk of being large for gestational age or overweight or obese. And actually, that's right from 24 weeks. So for women who might be sitting on a lower percentage time and range, it's quite important that they're not overwhelmed by the distance between them and the 70% target. The target is not there to beat people up with. It's there as a goal, but every little step towards that goal makes a real difference to the baby's outcomes. And this is just when we take all of the continuous glucose monitoring data we have in type 1 pregnancies and we put it together, we're looking here at the profiles, at the difference in the glucose levels between the mothers who went on to have a large baby versus those who didn't. And actually what we now know is it's a very small difference. It's almost like it's a mean glucose difference of between 0.3 to 0.5 millimoles per litre, a teeny tiny difference, but over a long number of hours, so over 14, 16 hours a day. Women who do go on to have larger babies run the slightly higher glucose levels, predominantly after meal times and snack times as well. And actually the women who, it's on the next slide, the women who took part in our study, in the concept study, just the UK women, we didn't do it in the other countries, they kept really detailed food diaries for us. And there's a great debate in pregnancy and even outside of pregnancy about how much carbohydrate should you eat in a day, how much is needed for the fetal brain or the baby's brain to develop. And overall, we mostly suggest that around about 180 grams of carbohydrate is the recommended daily intake. And we have to say, surprised to see that for pregnant women, and these are, motivated, educated women who've chosen to take part in a trial, and they've agreed to keep these food diaries for us. When we analysed the diaries, and the diaries were anonymised, so they didn't go to any of the clinical care teams, they didn't go to the dietitians. But when we looked at what women were eating, out of their total daily carbohydrate intake of 180 grams, around about 90 grams a day was made up from what the American Diabetes Association called non-recommended, but what you and I, most of us would probably call junk food or high, glucose, things with really fast acting or high GI, glycemic index foods. So these non-recommended sources make up a really substantial part of the daily calories and carbs for pregnant women. Now, some of those are probably to do with treating hypos. Pregnant women make a real big focus on making the best dietary choices they can during their main meals, breakfast, lunch and dinner. And then like the rest of us, they're a bit hungry, in between time, we're less mindful. So grabbing those snacks in between, plays a really big part in why those glucose levels can be running higher between meal times. And this is just the links to all of the DTN videos, the YouTube videos that are designed both for healthcare professionals, but actually predominantly for women and by women with diabetes. So there's lots of user stories there. There's tips and top tips for starting CGM, and then for understanding how to use CGM as the hormone levels change through the different stages. So early pregnancy, mid-pregnancy, and later on. And then the bit of the new sort of things that are around are the closed loop automated insulin delivery systems. This one is the one that I've worked with the most, is the Cambridge one, and that has been supported by JDRF. But we're just waiting for the results of our study. This is one of our pregnant women using the closed loop as part of the study. And you can just see how flat her day to day. You can still pick out when she has breakfast, lunch and dinner. But she's achieving the 70-80% time and range. And this was a woman that we looked after 6-7 years on her journey to getting pregnant. And she, that is crazy, as she says, it's crazy hard work. It's a ton of insulin. She calculated, she had this lovely spreadsheet, 17,000 units of insulin she took over her pregnancy. But she did manage to have a normal, healthy baby, actually perfect weight, and a 37 weeks gestation. So I'm not denying that it's difficult and not easy to manage type 1 diabetes, but I think the technology is making it much better, and all pregnant women now should have access to the real-time CGM. One thing that is changed a little bit in the last year or two is, as well as women being empowered to use it during their pregnancies at home, they're increasingly allowed to use it now in hospital settings too. So we're having many, many more women using CGM devices through labour and birth. But remembering, you're not looking for 100%. It's really aim for 70, but every little bit helps. And hopefully we'll have results from our JDRF funded closed loop pivotal trials in pregnancy very soon.
Thank you so much, Helen. That was absolutely amazing. And I love that picture at the end with the baby with the Dexcoms. That was so beautiful. So it is possible. Anything is possible. And maybe you could share those YouTube links in the chat for everybody who didn't manage to grab hold of all of those, because they looked really useful. Thank you again to Dr. Helen Murphy for that really amazing presentation on pregnancy. So there was a lot there to think about. We've got one more very quick presentation before we go to a comfort break, and that is from the lovely Emma and Jessica from Dexcom. So I will hand over to you guys. Hi, Emma.
Hi, thank you so much, Natalie. Hello, my name's Emma. I'm here with my colleague Jess. We feel very privileged to be here with you lovely ladies this evening. We'll both be available in the Q&A to answer your questions, and we hope you enjoy our video. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Olivia and this is Barnaby. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes 10 years ago to this year in October 2010. Dexcom took a huge amount of stress away from me. I mean, pregnancy is stressful enough for a regular pregnancy, let alone a pregnancy with type 1 diabetes. I feel like Dexcom just gave me the freedom to enjoy it a little bit more and just have, I don't know, management that was doable for me really in my lifestyle.
And yeah, please ask again, Emma and Jess, any questions in the Q&A section. I had the privilege of trying a G7 out earlier on this year, and it is very cool. Emma did say there was a 30-minute warm-up time, but she didn't tell you about the trick. It starts to warm up from the moment that you apply it. And so technically you can put it on half an hour before your other one finishes and then switch over. So there can be 0 warm-up time, which is very cool.
You can, because of course, sorry, I forgot to mention that, didn't I? You've got a 12-hour grace period as well.
You do. You have a grace period as well. So
absolutely.
There you go. There you go. I'm going to come work for Dexcom now, Emma.
Please do. We'd be delighted to have you. Delighted to have you, Natalie.
Oh,
thank
brilliant.
you.
Right. Okay, everyone. We are going to have a very quick 10-minute comfort break, so you can pop to the loo, go and get a brew on, anything that you need to do. I'm a northerner. Sorry for anyone who didn't understand. Get a brew on. That's a cup of tea. And whilst we are having the comfort break, there will be a Slido that you can fill in. So Mary is very kindly putting the slides on the screen now. And the question is, what symptoms of menopause or perimenopause have you experienced? And you can go over to slido.com and type in the code MENOT1D, that's MENOT1D. And on the slide that appears, type in as many symptoms as you want, and you'll see a list of symptoms here in front of you. The more mentions that a symptom gets, it's going to go into our word cloud, and the more mentions, the bigger the word. So we'll see, you know, what a lot of people, you know, are sharing, what common symptoms everybody's experiencing, which will be really nice and can be quite comforting as well. So speaking of comforting, 10-minute comfort break. I'll catch you guys in 10 minutes. The kids, or wherever you've been, I've enjoyed your 10 minutes. Thank you all for sticking with us and coming back, because this we're going to have lots more exciting speakers in the next part of this, including our lived experience section, which keep coming back to this peer support thing, guys. It's just amazing to hear from other people who are going through the same things as you. So thank you for everyone for contributing in the chat as well. It's really been lively in there, so thank you for that. And I will get straight back into it and introduce the lovely Caroline from Insulet Omnipod.
Hi, Natalie.
Hi, Caroline. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Have you got your timer on?
I have, yes. I've practiced, don't worry.
Okay, brilliant. All right, I will hand straight over to you to give us your Omnipod presentation.
I will just share my screen. Is that showing properly?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Fab, thank you. So yes, I'm Caroline, I'm from Insulet, and I'm here to tell you about the Omnipod Dash insulin management system. So it's a two-part system. The first part that you can see on the screen here is the handset, or the PDM. It's a smartphone-like device, and it's programmed with all your personal insulin settings. It's really easy to use, very intuitive system, and it communicates wirelessly via Bluetooth with the pod, which you wear on your body. The second part is the pod that I've just mentioned. You can see here, it's small, lightweight and waterproof, all of which contribute to helping make life with diabetes just that little bit easier. I use this system myself, and the lack of tubing and the fact that it's waterproof has genuinely been life-changing for me, whether it's just not needing to disconnect for showering or swimming, bolusing for meals with a touch of a button, or simply making easier wardrobe choices. I can also program different basal profiles for different times of the month to accommodate the different insulin sensitivities due to the hormonal changes that we've been talking about. The pod can be worn anywhere on the body that you would inject insulin. It holds up to 200 units of insulin, and it can be worn for up to 3 days, which, if you're injecting, on average replaces about 14 injections in the same time period. It's a really simple tubeless system, so there are fewer parts than you see on the traditional tube pumps. Makes it really easy to use. It's very simple to apply. You just activate it by injecting insulin, stick it onto your skin, and automatically insert the cannula with the touch of a button. You can order a pod experience kit on our website, so you can see what it feels like to actually wear the pod. And I'll put a link in the chat to that after this session. I'd also encourage you to register for one of our live demos, which you can also do on our website, so you can learn more about the system. The current system, Omnipod Dash, you could use with any blood glucose method that you prefer. You just manually enter that value. But our next generation, called Omnipod 5, is due to launch mid-2023, and that is a hybrid closed loop system which will connect with the Dexcom G6 when we launch. And if you'd like to scan that QR code, you can register for information on the website, so you can keep up to date as and when more information is available. I will move into the chat, so if you have got any questions, please feel free to post them there, and I will do my best to answer them. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Caroline. That was amazing.
No
And
problem.
I use an Omnipod. I started my Omnipod journey by using an experience kit and seeing what it felt like. So absolutely, if you've not tried one, do order an experience kit and give it a go. So
I'll stop sharing now. I just wanted to leave that QR code there for people to scan.
Thank you so much, Caroline. And I feel like I've been kind of rushing through all of my bits because I just don't want to stop anybody. Everybody's been so amazing. I never want to stop anyone from speaking. So I'm trying to make up the time now in between so that we can make time for everyone, and especially for this next bit, which is our lived experience section. And we're going to hear from a few people. First of all, our lovely Mary is going to share Nikki's story, and then you're going to hear from Dawn, Sammy, Siobhan, and Alex, I believe. So I'm going to hand straight over to Mary. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just doing this today because Nikki couldn't make it tonight. And Nikki is a woman who is pregnant at the minute, and she is the founder of My Type of Family on Twitter. She also has the blog What Nikki Did Next. And I asked her to describe what best gives her the passions for this topic of sharing her pregnancy journeys. And she has, one of my first concerns at diagnosis was I still able to have children? 2 years of being told I'd have a giant baby, or it would catch my diabetes or be deformed. I didn't believe this was true, and despite some great progress, there are still women who believe having children whilst living with type 1 is not something they can do, and I strongly feel that a decision they should make based on their feelings and circumstances, not outdated stereotypes and misconceptions. I asked her where to start on the pregnancy journey and give you information, and I'm going to just briefly go through a couple of pointers because I know we're running out of time. But she says to make sure you have access to folic acid, like Helen mentioned, and anything else you may need to do before conceiving. Whilst I was already taking folic acid, none of my pregnancies were planned to speak of, so be more prepared. Under peer support networks for you and why they help. She has pregnancy and parenthood can be an exceptionally lonely place at times, more so when you're also balancing the needs of a chronic condition, and the stakes tend to be higher too. So the groups of other mamas I know I now count as friends have literally saved my sanity on occasion. These are Nikki's words. I also think as a group, we can help those hopeful parents to know what's achievable whilst contributing to a better conversation overall. It's one of the reasons I set up my type of family on Twitter. So what to expect on a personal level? She has expect more appointments than friends without diabetes. You'll have an average fortnightly contact with specialist diabetes antenatal teams, and this is alongside your usual appointments with your community midwife during the pregnancy. Do lots of research on birth choices and know that although risks will probably be talked about, they're not foregone conclusions. You'll most likely meet your baby around 38 weeks. And if you want to use hypnobirthing or have every method of pain relief available, then that's your choice and is still possible. And also that anything can and sometimes will happen. So prepare yourself. There are some excellent services to familiarize yourself with for the postnatal period, both afterthoughts and debriefing services to go through your notes with a qualified midwife and be able to ask questions. It helps to process it all. She says, be prepared to be proactive in seeking support with blood glucose management during this time. And if you have the foresight and availability, maybe make an appointment with your consultant for 4 to 6 weeks after the baby arrives. And she has personally, you're going to feel challenged and you're going to struggle at times with how relentless it all is, but honestly, it's worth it. So I'm going to pass you back to Natalie, who'll introduce the last of our lived experience panel.
That was so lovely to hear. So thank you for sharing that, Mary, because it is comforting to know other people are going through it. And there's so many people, that's the great thing about our community, is so many people then decide to take action.
That's
and do something and give back, and that's amazing. So yeah, do connect with Nikki, all of you. And I'm going to hand over to the lovely Dawn Adams now. Now, Dawn is a midwife with a specialist interest in diabetes and pregnancy. She's completing a PhD, so we'll soon be calling her Dr. Dawn Adams, and her PhD will be in type 1 pregnancy and wearable technology. So that is just hitting all of those nails right on the head. And in recent years, she's also been pushing for more information about menopause for women and women with type 1 diabetes through DDoC, which is an international community that you run this. For those of you who don't know, hashtag DEDOC is an international community by and for people with diabetes, and believe in the core principles of, we're going to say it again, peer support and the diabetes online community. So thank you, Dawn, and you're going to introduce a panel to us, I believe. So I will hand over to you.
So yeah, I've been joined this evening by some amazing people from right across different social media platforms. I'd just like them to introduce themselves to you, give you a wee sentence about who they are and why they're talking about their menopause experiences here tonight with the rest of us. So over to you, ladies, in no particular order, or do you want me to give you an order? Alex, you're first alphabetically, work away.
Yoo-hoo, so lucky. Hi there, I'm Alex, and I'm T1D, diagnosed in 99, so quite a few years back. And yes, I am at that age where I'm perimenopausal, and basically I befriended a group of people on Twitter, of which Dawn was part of, as well as Siobhan and Mary, and we decided to create a WhatsApp group where we go in and rant about diabetes in general and menopause in particular and all the symptoms. And basically it's a peer support, and you always have someone that can reassure you that what you are experiencing, if a bit out of the ordinary, you're not alone, and that's extremely helpful.
Thank you.
That will be me.
And Sammy, over to you next.
Right, well, hi, I'm Sam, and I've been type 1 diabetic for 47 years, and now entering that particular period of life, which is fun. And I decided to help set up a support group on Facebook, designed purely for type 1 diabetics who are either perimenopausal, menopausal, or postmenopausal, simply because we found there was no other support out there or help out there. There's nothing on the website. And we basically do the same as Alex and Dawn and Siobhan. We simply sit and moan about the lack of help and understanding out there for us.
And Siobhan, maybe you'd like to say something about things that you've done recently. You've done quite some very cool things in the past month, as well as a wee bit about yourself, obviously.
Have I?
And
Hi, I'm Siobhan. I live in County Louth, haven't travelled the world, but settled here, and went through actually all of my hormonal parts, such a word, anyway, in Ireland, puberty, where I had very supportive DSNs and could ask anything, usually get an answer, pregnancy, where as well the support from the medical profession was fantastic. Then come 2014-15, go looking for support for perimenopause, met with the shrug of the shoulders, met with, I don't know, there's no research. Okay, so I, contacted, looked through, sent calls out, and there was nothing there. And just something Helen Murphy said tonight struck me. She said there's an app for everything. Well, Helen, there ain't one for type 1 diabetes and the menopause. So anybody willing to create that? So anyway, I've got more vocal about it. I've spoke to the Women's Health Task Force here in Ireland recently, and hopefully maybe brought more attention to it here in Ireland and worldwide, because apparently there are only 2 a Women's Health Task Force in government throughout the world. So all you can do is hope.
yeah, and hopefully we are going to see some changes coming forward from that. The Slido that was up during the break time, I don't know if you all got a wee chance to have a look at that. I think Mary's going to put it up for us now. A lot of the themes in it were quite similar to ones that we encountered, Shiv, how many years ago was that now? 3.5 years ago we did. And there's a lot of themes that are there. Which in particular are the things that each of you have experienced with regard to your menopause journey that really leap out from what's on the screen?
Definitely insulin resistance. 100% that, without a doubt.
And have you found your levels have changed much, Sammy, in what you're requiring for the same amount of carbs as you would have done maybe 5 years ago?
Yes, definitely. I mean, thankfully the Libra 2 helps spot the patterns slightly, but there's no consistency to them. So you can have erratic blood sugars every day. One day you could be really insulin resistant, the next day you're really insulin sensitive, and that can also happen during the same 24-hour period. And it's hard to predict, such as it is when you're within the age range of having normal periods. Suddenly you hit the menopause or the perimenopause, those hormones start fluctuating like mad during the day. So every symptom you get during the month normally can happen within 24 hours with absolutely no predictability at all.
And I think that's something we've found quite a wee bit in our own support groups, in your Facebook support group and in the Twitter ones and the WhatsApp ones as well.
100%.
And Shiv, is there something there that's really leaping out for you and going, yep, that was me?
Yep. Well, what Sammy said about the insulin resistance, the physical aspect, yes. But for me, it's more the psychological aspect. It's coping with perimenopause, menopause, with the irrationality, irritability, and then trying to manage your type 1 diabetes at the same time. It's like a double whammy. It's like you're going on a bungee jump, but you've nothing bungee to catch it. You know, it's we've had this conversation before. I've done all of those things, but I've had a safety net. With the perimenopause, you have no safety, or menopause, no safety net, because there's no medical evidence stroke research out there. So it would be the psychological allied with trying to manage the insulin resistance or sensitivity, or knowing the difference between the hot flushes, night sweats, and hypos. It's all of them, really.
In any combination, depending on what way the wind's blowing that time.
Yes, like when you're surfing blindfold on, as you said.
And Alex, what have you found has been the most challenging of all the symptoms? The other girls have talked about the physiological and the psychological. Is there anything in addition to that that has really whipped the feet underneath you on more than one occasion?
Well, so as well as you say, physical, yes, it's going back to experiencing migraines, which I had kind of left behind after my second pregnancy, and then they are back with a vengeance. And growing up as an adolescent, my migraines were cyclical. So every month, bang, you have it. And it's kind of coming back to that. So it's I'm still bleeding, so I am perimenopausal, but it's a bit like a second puberty somehow, except that it's you don't get the help that you need in understanding what's going on, and it's really annoying because so many things are interacting that identifying a pattern is nearly mission impossible. You really need to live in the moment. You can't even say that you can do something for 24 hours, because as Sammy mentioned, it could change in a 4-hour window. So it's just keeping at it, basically trying to ride a wave. It's the best way I can say, but it is challenging, really challenging. And peer support is thankfully such a big help, because you really need to vent with like-minded people. So like you go to a T1D support group just to exchange about the challenges of diabetes, having that group of menopausal women who have also T1D is, it was just an answer to any prayers, I think. It has really helped. And as you know very well, we do also have time to do some banter, as well as being annoyed by the cards that we are being dealt with.
And it is really important, that, isn't it, being able to have a wee laugh about things that are going on, because they're not things that you can maybe readily talk about with your endocrinologist, who doesn't necessarily believe that what you're experiencing is going on. And even trying to talk to other family members, they just don't want to hear. I know in our house, the 5 men that I live with do not want to hear about that crack any more than they actually have to.
Yeah.
What have you found to be your most surprising symptoms? I don't think any of us are really well educated on what menopause involves. We know a wee bit about irrational moods. We know a wee bit about hot flushes. We know a wee bit about periods stopping. But what for each of you was the key thing that really, I think, has maybe hit you hardest in terms of what you've experienced in the way of symptoms that you didn't experience, or you didn't expect, or didn't know to expect?
Lack of sleep for me.
And that
I think for mine,
glucose levels too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was definitely the glucose levels. I had no idea that was coming at all. Yeah. I really didn't. I thought everything would just carry on as it has done for the last however many years. But no, it really, really doesn't. And then, of course, you have the counter effect of the brain fog. Is that because it's the menopause? Is it because your sugars have been high or they've been low? Is it the post-hypo hangover? It's hard to pinpoint what's actually due to the menopause or due to the menopause affecting your diabetes, or your diabetes affecting the menopause. It's a minefield.
Because it is very much
it really is.
Of 2 strands, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cycle that you cannot tear apart, basically. You don't know which one is influencing which. And that's why I think we also are lacking in support, because no one really wants to touch it.
Yeah. And Alex,
Yeah.
you've all referenced the different peer support networks that we're all involved in, which is how we've got to know each other as well. And
Absolutely. So first was Twitter,
yeah.
and then obviously Beth and some others created the WhatsApp group, so the Menopause Muses, sorry. And then obviously we have Sammy's group on Facebook. Twitter is still very active, even if you're not part of the group. I mean, you will always find some like-minded people. We are still there because the Twitter app is still working. We are not yet all moved to Mastodon. Yeah.
I think that was one of our biggest shocks, wasn't it? Never mind menopause and type 1. We thought we were losing Twitter there for a couple of weeks.
There's also a few good blogs out there. Like I went looking way back and didn't find anything initially. Then I found one by Annie Cooper, and that was the first. And Annie had the same frustration. She couldn't find anything. And as you know, she is a nurse, a highly qualified nurse, and lives with type 1 as well. And then a couple of years later, I think Sarah Gatward did a brilliant 6-part series. I think it was 6-part on hers. And then more recently, yourself, you've had articles done, and you also have the blog. Amrenza then, I won't even attempt to say her second name because I guess it's wrong, but she has the Menopause Project, is it? I think. Yeah. Now, they're the only ones I've read. And while they may not be as interactive, appealing for me in the beginning, trying to get a handle on where I was going, because I didn't actually know what was happening to me. And like I knew, or I had my suspicions, but to get met with a shrug of the shoulders, it was like, God's sake, have we not moved on? But to find something like that, it went, okay, I'm not the only bloody stark raving lunatic out there with type 1 diabetes. Like Annie's really did set me going, put my mind at rest, which helped, because at the time I didn't have tech. I was still finger pricking. And so I had no idea where I was being given out to about high HbA1cs. I did move clinic then and got a more sympathetic, but still met with the shrug of the shoulders. So there are blogs for anybody starting on the journey that want to do background research.
And Sammy, your Facebook support group, I joined it about a year ago, I think it was. And I have to say, it alongside the Twitter chats, the WhatsApp group, and the blogs that have all been referenced so far, it's for me, it's been a really helpful, supportive group, because I'd like you to talk a wee bit more about it and the ethos, because quite often people see Facebook groups and go, that's really quite scary, I don't want to go in there. That's a lot of people who are going to tell me what to do, what I need to do, and they're going to pull me apart.
Yeah.
That's not one of the things your group does.
No. It's completely private, so nobody will know unless you choose to tell them. It is for women only. Men are not allowed. And it is only for type 1 diabetics. It doesn't matter whether you are actually perimenopausal, menopausal, or postmenopausal. It's if you are even just coming up to that period and you maybe have suspicions. And we're just basically a group of women that help, support, advise, share experiences, make recommendations maybe on routes they can take if they're struggling with their GP or their consultants or DSNs, many of which will be in denial that menopause and diabetes being connected, or well, not connected, but affecting each other is even a thing. And that's what we do. And we have a laugh and we have a joke, because at the end of the day, if you don't have a laugh and a joke about horrible things that happen in life like this, you're going to go mad. But it's great because everyone is there, no matter what their story, whether it's the surgical menopause, the natural menopause, early, late, whatever stage they're at. We have a lot of women who are postmenopausal who shared what they went through. If you choose HRT isn't a route you want to take, there are plenty of women in there who have also decided not to take HRT for whatever reason, and they share their experiences, what's helped, what didn't help, etc. So yeah, no, there's no judgment at all. Feel free, come in, have a laugh, pull up a glass of wine, make sure you've opened the chocolates, they're mine, whichever ones they are, I'm not fussy, and just come in. That's it.
I think across all the different platforms that we've mentioned, quite often we see women coming in and talking about things they've been told that aren't necessarily true. And I know before Shiv and I had met with a group of about a dozen people from across the island of Ireland, and there were a number of recurrent themes in that very relaxed, very informal, very unstructured chat that were coming out. And I know one of the things I was told that I still remember to this day from that hospital bed 30 years ago was being told that I probably wouldn't live long enough to experience the menopause. And I know that for you girls, there have been different things that you've heard along the way and that others have heard as well. And I'd like you to do a wee bit of myth busting now. So something that you've heard that's probably a common theme, and just to share that with our audience here, and how, maybe why it's not something that we should be maintaining, that myth, why we need to go out and do that myth busting.
Well, I think one I've come across the most in the group is diabetics enter the menopause earlier because they're diabetic, which is complete and utter rubbish. It is nearly always a familial link, but they're even hearing this from consultants, from DSNs, from GPs, and it is so entrenched now in urban myth that I think, oh, well, it must be true then, but it really isn't. I know that's one I've heard a lot. I don't know about you, Shiv, Alex.
Yeah, I've heard that quite a lot as well. But the one I really, like, I was diagnosed in 1975, same probably as you, Sammy, I think.
Yeah, not far off, yeah.
Yeah, I was diagnosed and was told I'd never live to pregnancy. Yeah. I'd never be able to have children. Menopause wasn't even mentioned because I wasn't supposed to be.
Won't fly.
Yeah, exactly. My parents were told if she lives till 40, she'll be lucky. She will have to have a surgical, a removal of now, Dawn, what are all my organs that I need? I have a child, but I can't remember.
But just go on your girl stuff.
My girl stuff. But so I didn't expect that. Then when I had my baby way back in 2002, there was no conversation in this year about, oh, you might live to see the menopause, you might live to see 50. So I still wasn't expecting. It was year by year. So that is something I definitely remember. You will not live to have a child, never mind menopause. But yeah.
I also get a lot of oh, well, your blood glucose isn't affected by your hormones. So whatever is happening with your glucose levels, it's something you're doing or not doing as a diabetic. It's not the menopause at all. They're completely unconnected.
Which kind of go with me, because I realized that I needed a different, well, I knew it, but I was actually told that I may need a different insulin regimen when I was having my periods. And I discovered this like 2 or 3 years ago. Now I'm nearly reaching 50. So, why did it take so long for them to tell me that? I mean, I was suspecting it. So I was doing things on my own, but I was a bit kind of afraid to discuss it because I was kind of playing, in uncharted territory somehow.
Yeah. Do you think that's part of it, though? I think part of it, especially for us old timers, we've been doing it for so long and managing our levels for so long on our own, with very little input from hospitals and consultants, etc., that we just kind of go, oh, right, okay, this has happened. Right, I'll do this.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Definitely. Yeah. I know, I think I've said to you girls before as well, like having conversations with my consultant in 2010 about periods, because by that stage you'd gone from 1 finger prick a day and waiting 2 minutes for your blood glucose to read on those meters from when I was diagnosed, to it read in 30 seconds. That was so fast. For anybody who's been diagnosed in the last 5 years, you're going like, really? How old are you? Old enough. But I saw the 30 seconds and I was checking like 8 times a day, and I was able to go in and say, I think I know when my period's coming, because my glucose levels go up and it doesn't matter what I'm doing. My daphne stuff and my correction stuff isn't working. And he just looked at me and shook his head sadly and went, that doesn't happen. And I felt so invalidated. But you're all using technology, and again, you've mentioned some of that. Do you think that having the access to tech now this is a very leading question, this is something that is giving you a much bigger insight? And do you think it's something that we should be starting to look at more, the use of technology in women of a certain age and older, as well as younger populations, to help us with our glucose control too, given the fact that we haven't died, given the fact that we've got to this stage in life and we're really doing pretty well?
Yeah. I would say yes. Okay. And the reason, one, I went through puberty, still peeing on a stick. I had support, medical support. I went through pregnancy, finger pricking. I had medical support.
Yeah.
I am going through, or went through, the perimenopause, going through the menopause with totally 0% of medical support, only for I have the tech. I would be even more of a mad raving lunatic than I am at the moment. So my answer, short, yes. The others were, I had no tech, but I had medical support. Now I have absolutely no medical support. So my heart goes out, and it makes me very sad to see women with type 1 diabetes managing with no tech, especially a CGM. And look, I'm not holding back. I will say a CGM.
Yeah, I must admit, the Libra for me has been so enlightening. Like Shiv, went through puberty. Admittedly, I was stupid in puberty and ignored the fact I got diabetes, but that's a whole different story. Had 4 children, all perfectly fit, healthy adults now, or as adult as boys get anyway. And again, no tech, but again with the hospital support, all backing me up no the way. It is literally only the fact that I can look at a screen and it says to me, this is happening when you aren't testing, when you aren't finger pricking, this is happening in the background. This isn't because of food. This isn't because you haven't eaten, or because you've exercised, or because you've sat on the sofa in a big tub of celebrations or whatever. This has happened in the background without you having any physical impact on your blood glucose yourself. So that is telling me alone that there is something else going on, which gave me the confidence to go to the GP and say, explain this. And then they say, oh, well, this can't happen, that can't happen. No, it's because you're not doing X, Y, and Z. Okay, so explain this then. It gives you the proof to go to whoever you need to go to and say, so why is this happening when it hasn't happened before? You know, they can go sort of, however, I mean, I was very lucky, I got the Libra very early on. So for me, they can go sort of 3 or 4 years back. No, probably longer actually. And so, yeah, everything was fine then. And then all of a sudden, about 18 months, 2 years ago, things start going haywire with nothing changing for me that I was actually doing. It just gives you that evidence. So when they say, oh, your hormones don't affect your blood sugars, well, what the hell is them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Alex, you're using something slightly different from the Dex and the Libra, aren't you? You're using...
I'm on the Ivory closed loop with Medtronic, so I have the 780G and it's a G4 sensor, and it's working well. But what I wanted just to say is to go back to your answer. Yes, a massive yes. I think we really need to start looking into this, because down the line, and as was highlighted before with the different doctors we have on the panel tonight, you know, there's a lot of information out there for, it seems, for puberty and for pregnancy. But when it comes to the third time for a woman where hormones are going haywire, which is the, you know, the one we are at right now, so perimenopause, menopause, postmenopausal, there's hardly anything. And it's high time that, you know, it's being addressed. We're half of the population. And yeah, you know, we really need to try to do something just for the woman coming after us, because otherwise it's not going to evolve, and we're treated like, well, that we don't matter, and we still do.
Yeah.
We still do.
50% of the population, 2% of research funding globally goes towards women's health. I read something today from, I must send you the link, Mary, you can pull it up, in the Israeli Times. 4% of funding in gynaes and obstetrics, 4% goes towards menopause. Not diabetes now related, but only 4% of it goes towards menopause.
Which is probably why the last published research was written in 2009, 2010. And I say quite a few people are asking in the chat there about early menopause starting earlier with type 1. It actually doesn't. The evidence that is out there would suggest that it starts in women with type 1 who are Caucasian backgrounds around the age of 51, 52, which isn't significantly different from women without any type of diabetes. If you happen to be from an Asian background and you have type 1, you will start a wee bit earlier, at around the age of 46. But again, that would sit with anybody who is from an Asian background as well. So that it's something I think that we all grew up being told, and that we all have aged being told, or were told at diagnosis or whenever we were having our children. But there is no hard and fast evidence based on that at all. And it was something that was discussed today at the IDF Europe talks as well. I was at earlier today. So I think, Mary's, thank you very much to everybody for your input. I've really appreciated that. And as always, I keep learning so much from you girls every time we meet up and every time we're chatting. I hope it's been useful for everyone else. And I think Mary's going to put up another Slido poll as well.
Yes, so thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Alex, Sammy, Siobhan, everyone on the call. That was absolutely fascinating, and I saw a lot of thank yous popping up in the chat from women and girls of all ages. You know, you really are blazing a trail here, ladies, because you know, it is something that's not been talked about. We've been expected to sort of brush it under the carpet and no, don't talk about things like that. But I mean, why not? You know, I personally, my dad always says I'm forthright, which I think is his very nice way of saying that I talk about things that I shouldn't talk about. So I am absolutely all for it, for you guys standing up and shouting about this. It's so important. So, and some amazing, you came back to some topics that were really interesting to me, even though I'm not at that stage yet. You know, coming back to the hormones again and again, my GP used to say to me, well, you're obviously not testing pre-meal and post-meal and counting your carbs right, because you're high again by the time you do your next pre-meal. And it wasn't until I got you know, a CGM, we're going back to the tech thing, that we realized that I actually, my response to cortisol, what I produce when I get stressed, is I'm completely insulin resistant. So I could have been running to work late, not eating a thing, and my blood sugars would shoot up to 17. So I did feel kind of vindicated when I got that information from CGM and was able to take that back to my doctor. But yeah, it's just so important that I say yes to tech. In answer to your question, yes to tech. You know, I feel like some people are even treated or have been treated by their clinicians as though like their kids asking for the latest iPhone or something. And it's like, no, none of us want to have type 1. We're only asking to have the best quality of life that we possibly can. If that is available to us, we should be able to have it, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
And I did see one particular comment, Siobhan, that was like, Siobhan, thank you for your honesty. So I just wanted to point that out. So I'm gonna let Mary put up the last Slido, we've got one more poll for you guys to take part in tonight. And the question is, what is the one thing that you'll take away from tonight's sessions on females and type 1 diabetes? And once again, the link is slido.com and the code this time is females T1D. So there you go, you can see the information on the screen there. And thank you for contributing all the way through tonight. We are going to leave the chat open, I think, for another 30 minutes after this session finishes, so that you guys can read through all the chat and look at the nice word cloud that you're creating for us right now. And I'd just like to take a moment once again to thank everybody who has contributed to this tonight, to Mary, to all of our sponsors, to all of our speakers, especially Dr. Fiona Campbell, Dr. Helen Murphy, to Nikki for contributing her story, and to Dawn, Sammy, Siobhan and Alex there for that amazing discussion. That was the bit that I was really excited about, the lived experience bit. And finally, to all of you guys for coming along and taking part and joining in the chat. I hope you found it all really useful. Do get involved in the diabetes online community. Follow any of the people that you've heard from tonight. If you want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter at Real Miss Balmain, on Instagram as Miss Balmain. And finally, we would really appreciate your feedback. So we do have an evaluation form, which we will send out via email following the event. And just thank you once again, everyone.